It took months until Sister Stern managed to finally kill Illuminator Sears, not because she couldn't find him, but because the Kritepeak was very crafty and well equipped with powerful Necron artifacts, including a portable Gloom_prism that reduced Stern's damage. But now, I got the prism for myself, a prize worth more than a planet. The time was not wasted, however. Speranza did as he promised, and helped me complete not only 12 Vulcan clones, but also 12 clone Skanes variants to be used as soldiers, explorers, miners, woodsmen, engineers and any other major trade needed to expand the Lancefire domain. Not by accident, the Vulcan clones were also gifted the same clone Skanes as each different clone clade, and put in charge of them. A Primarch was extremely competent by default, far better at a chosen task than my admirals, generals, spies, logisticians and other leadership roles, except perhaps the Adeptus Mechanicus, although it came close. Fabricator Gemma was competent, amazingly so. While the engineer Vulcan clone was possibly smarter, he lacked the breadth of knowledge and sheer experience with machine canticles, and the subtle undertones of the Mechanicus. For the tech priests had codified control codes and execute programs into their voice and signals, and were able to remotely activate or subdue any Imperial machinery, and it went much further than that as Adeptus ranks went higher. While this clone called himself Hephaestus, the name was too long for me, so it rapidly became Hef, possibly to his annoyance. Only Speranza calls him by the long name, possibly because the AI doesn't have a memory problem. Anyways, he does a good job in fixing damage to Astartes artifacts, and even better at changing and upgrading STCs. The other important clone has called himself Anzion, after the Anzion_S_pseudogeneta device used to dismantle people alive by the Magi biologists. As expected, he helped us develop better clone Skanes, and even improved his clone brothers while in their gene crucible. The general clone called himself Spartan, possibly after the Spartan_assault_tank used during the Great Crusade. I do have 3 very damaged models in my inventory, so maybe he can recover something from them. One of his brain lobes has been modified by Anzion for extra planning ability, even beyond what regular Primarchs could do. Sadly though, the perpetual ability is missing from all the clones, and I know because the first clone actually died. Only after using a drop of my own blood into the gene crucibles did the clones start emerging alive. So that almost makes them my sons too. Anyways, 1 drop of blood is enough for them to become Lancefires, and even the Demiurge Fane accepted them as kin. 4-meter-tall kin, but who's counting? Luckily I had Canis suggest this path to me, as we both stared with gloom at the dead clone. On the left hand, I now have an original clone of Vulcan, red eyes and all. On the other hand, the dead clone's blood creates gene seed defects into aspirants, making their organs go haywire and grow bones in unlikely places, without stopping. Even in blanks. Only the original blood can produce stable Astartes, and even then, only my blank sons can withstand the transformation, and barely. Half of them still die painfully, even before receiving the Primaris organs. Much like the boys I sent to the Space Wolves. Gene seed tech is still half magic even for brilliant minds like my Magi biologists, the Vulcan clones and Speranza himself. Anzion is still planning to create some 40 Salamanders Primaris successor chapters, but only after we select the most fit candidates from the blank Katakan stock. And after we finish up the real Invictus warsuit, upgraded with the best Trazyn or Demiurge source weapons and shields. I was sneaky enough to obtain the Vulcanite STC along with the Void Bike, which would make an excellent heavy weapon for the new suits. And speaking of Trazyn, it was time to finish the trade. I gather Canis and the coffin of the clone Vulcan and simply step onto Solemnis, as a solemn state visit. Our species may be at war, but my Lancefire clan and his dynasty are sort of allies. Lord Lancefire and Canis. I suspect you didn't come for tea, although I recently obtained a marvelous brand. Trazyn welcomed us, surrounded by a whole Astartes chapter, as well as tech priests and lich guards, all bound to his control engrams. Lord Trazyn. Some tea would be nice. And yourself, infinite and immortal as always, I presume? I asked with a friendly voice. Obviously. You may ask a small favor of me, if Illuminator Sears is actually dead. The Necron Lord offered along a very good cup of tea. I took a sip, and admired the skill of brewing such an amazing tea. Then again, he had 60 million years to perfect a lot of skills. So I took both corpses out, and placed them as an offering to the side. A Necron Illuminator and a Primarch clone, united in death with the same purpose. A gift to the Eternal Collector. Oh? It is him, really? Trazyn asked, suspicious. Come on. It is only a Vulcan clone, and dead as well. A priceless collectible, now that Fabius Bile has been evaporated. I explained patiently. You know I do keep an eye on your Lancefire realms, even more closely after the recent invitation to Elivar. And there are some living clones walking around. Far more valuable than a dead one, Trazyn declared with some distaste. I sighed inward. As expected, secrets were very hard to keep in this universe, as there were people able to observe events or entire timelines from distance. Or simply placed spies close to your core. I had no doubt that Ladies Chi and Elixir still sneaked out reports about my realm, even while working hard to protect it. Not to mention the Inquisitors. Those back home are not true clones. I had to insert my own blood into their making, just to keep them alive. And many other modifications. And if they carry my own blood, they are Lancefires now, I said in a colder voice. Trazyn the Infinite nodded gravely, and shifted his focus on my wolf. Canis, my dear puppy friend. Will you howl at me? He asked, curious. Gruo. Canis growled so fiercely my skin reacted instinctively, raising the hairs up. Amazing. The howl can indeed produce etheric disturbance, even inside my pylon active null_field_matrices. Do you see the resemblance with that etheric Primarch you brought to visit last time? The Necron asked in scientific curiosity. I smiled and nodded. Now I did see. This is our fault, both of us. Canis was beside me at Cadia. Also in the Garden of Nurgle. He must have ate something. Trazyn froze for a second, as my words percolated inside his metal cranium. That would make me his godfather. That's the right human word, right? He asked, a bit surprised. I laughed. He got the god part, true enough. Close enough, infinite Necron. There are also obligations from that word. Canis is now your ward, and you must do anything to protect him. Woof. Canis asked, surprised. Not kin, but close enough. Kinda like those space wolves, Canis. Hunt pack. I explained in a warm voice. Hey, I never said ! Hunt pack is actually a decent word. We did hunt together, quite some big prey too. I like it, Trazyn exclaimed as he reasoned things through. And now I have to go hunt again, Lord Trazyn. The Tyranids are still coming. Some Necrons are attacking Orpheus_sector. Some strange Xenos in the Halo stars. I complained in a low voice. The Necron Lord stared at me with his dead green eyes. If you destroy the Maynok_dynasty for me, I'll give you someone you'll like. Found her in the Pariah Nexus, with a pet dragon attached, much like your wolf. But different too. You're not a psyker. I thought perhaps it was the same type of soul bond you have with the puppy, but now that I know about our mishap at Cadia, it's possibly the opposite kind. Did you steal another Inquisitor? I asked jokingly. Trazyn never did change. You know me well by now, Pef Lancefire. Her name is Kyria_Draxus, Ordo Xenos. Quite hateful of Necrons, but friendly to Eldar. Is that strange? Trazyn wondered as he moved a wall to reveal a frozen woman dressed in power armor, with a green dragon on her shoulder. Her power fist still clutched some crystals of obvious Necron make. Was there anything important on those crystals? Your bank accounts, maybe? I asked ironically. Just imagine compound interest gathering for 60 million years. Maybe that's why he added infinite to his name. Haha. Ever so amusing, rogue trader. As if money has any meaning over millions of years. There is important information on these nemetic crystals that should not be revealed to the galaxy yet. However, the Necron Lord said furtively. I get it. Accidents happen. Suns go nova. The hunt pack still hunts. I answered with a knowing grin. Trazyn wanted someone killed, and I was the prefect patsy. We only made 5 million mines for now. When you return we will have more. I'll even have a manual for some device among my gifts. The Necron offered politely, as he transferred me back to Machine Forge, and my tesseract was filled with millions of Nova mines. Canis arrived a second later, with a Necron gloom prism fitted to his shield collar. Trazyn did try to act as a godfather, keeping the wolf safe from Pisca attacks. Woof. The wolf said wisely as he glanced at me. Yes, Canis. Very strong. As I returned to the Machine Forge, I did a grand tour of all the facilities, new and old. The tank factoriums make both the medium-sized Ragnaroks and the new Astarius Grav tanks, while the forges on board the Speranza Arc produced classic Baneblades. It seems I still lack the necessary authority to request better STC models from the AI. Or maybe he views me as a young, willful child? Maybe Hef will get through to him. They seem to respect one another. I can't produce and carry tank shells in quantity here. Even the artillery shells are difficult to produce and move to the troops. I need energy weapons for the auxilia, I demanded loudly. No, the AI replied curtly. Same answer as always. I see you do not block the Astartes from having energy weapons, you even help sometimes. I observed with reproach. The blank Astartes are not in danger of warp corruption. The AI explained in a more logical tone. I thought for a moment, then had to give in. If the AI saw normal humans as infection vectors, he would be careful not to arm them with unlimited ammo weapons. Especially heavy weapons like Baneblade-sized guns. You could have said so, from the start. But for now, I don't have enough blanks to create auxilia divisions. Maybe just one, I said with a sad voice. Then one blank division will get my Fulchin_super_heavy_tank model. With your quad multi-lasers inside sponsons for infantry work. 400 Fulchins armed with twin volcano cannons will be ready for equipment once the division is assembled. Armed sentinels with burst lances too, Speranza concluded with a final word. Fulchin? Wasn't that a lost relic? I didn't even have a single one. And even better, armed sentinels with rapid-firing lances. Although the damage decreased per shot by an order of magnitude compared to a normal volcano lance, they fired 20 times faster and didn't need to stop and cool down every minute. Hef, did you work on these new sentinels? I asked, curious. Speranza wasn't willing to modify his ancient STC's templates, but the clone had no remorse. Humph. Who else? The giant man grumbled in a morose voice. I took out some Tiamat hive carapace plates and gave them to him. Maybe you can figure a way to use this material for armor or cooling. I will need to install Hyperio's anti-air missiles on the Fulchins first. Your idea for the Astarius was quite good. Hef admitted with a reluctant tone. Hey, I did have a spark of genius sometimes. I just nodded modestly though. I could keep my pride in check. You think we should use twin iron beamers on the Invictus left arm? I asked instead. The gentle giant turned towards me, with his orange eyes glinting. Somehow, his eyes came out orange, don't ask me why. It was the first time I cloned a Primarch, so a small mistake wasn't that bad. Plus he was special now. No, Trader Lancefire. One iron beamer is good, but not all enemies are vulnerable to beamers. We will use a combo heavy bolter on that arm. There are some new bolter rounds I plan to create, with diverse payload, he said in a determined voice. I shrugged and let it go. So I loved the sci-fi iron beam you could chase enemies with. Even one was enough. and maybe a diverse bolter payload would be useful. Hef was quite smart too. Anyways, we had the giant Volkite gun on the right arm of the Invictus, which surprised even Hef when he first saw it. Not even the Great Crusade legions had such weapons, although they had similar ones of less strength. A metallic golem came to pick up the Tiamat carapace, and began to analyze it. "Do you have more of this?" Speranza asked with no ulterior motive. 1,000 mountains of this, if not yet peeled away. A hive fleet called Tiamat. Didn't have anything to peel them with, until I got the phase blades, I said with a shrug. Sometimes I forget you're a lucky bastard, Lancefire. This can be used as Titan armor. Maybe even better. The golem spoke with an ecstatic voice. There are plenty of Tyranids around, Speranza. I did just murder a whole hive fleet that attacked Forge Archetri. Cost me about 15,000 Nova mines, I declared politely. I still had headaches from so many long-distance teleports. Way too many Tyranid ships too, and I wasn't there to flick them into a sun. Hard work, dealing with Tyranids. Which reminded me, I should send a Lancefire ship to negotiate a trade deal with the rescued Forge world. Give them a personal Astartes chapter to equip, and have them on call for another save. The Forge worlds were still the most important linchpin for the defense of humanity, both as keepers of knowledge and production of new war materials. Still haven't found a Forge world to refuse a gift of STCs, till now. And the new ones were worth at least an entire fleet, plus an auxiliary army for the Astartes. Black Falchions. I knew I'd think of a good name for the next chapter, I exclaimed in amazement at my genius. Both the golem and Hef turned towards me, as if I distracted them from important work. Fill storage hangar 514 with more corpses. And 100 phased blades. If I'm right, we may have a way to armor up the sentinels without adamantium, Speranza demanded from his golem. The poor Nostari Ironkin was now a mere robot for the Speranza AI, not that the Mechanicus treated their automata better. Spartan already named them. Blazing Spartans. Hef added with a sarcastic tone. Of course he did, and sounded much better too. And a bit narcissistic, to be fair. Burning helots, flaming phalanxes and all sorts of Greek stuff. And fire, of course. Always fire with the Vulcan clones, the next chapter then. And I want a pirate flag for their sign. Crossed bones. I growled a little, as this will take another decade in the accelerated time field. Only a day in real time, though. Ships and armor were much harder to find. Must save more forges. Zorhulash will let me know if there's any good trade to obtain. Just go and impregnate more, Lancefire. I'll buy you a drink when you reach 40 women. Hef advised me in a gentle voice. Okay, back to my fucking duty. I just waited for the Eternal Lament to finish up its upgrades, before I could leave on the next crusade. Damn Trazyn and his juicy Inquisitor prize. I wondered if the dragon would join her in bed. It would be cool, right? Preparing for a crusade is always difficult and time-consuming. The logistics of moving and feeding a billion soldiers are so great, I was glad Margos and Spartan, the Admiral and General clones were around to organize the stuff here at Machine Forge. But the main star of the operation was the Strategus clone, already overseeing the recruitment and training of the Katakan and Blanks Auxilia at Alivar. Also upgraded with the planning brain lobe, the man overhauled the entire star system into an efficient war machine, and took charge directly of the transport fleet. At least supplies would be arriving on time from here onward, as Strategus also commanded an entire clone clade of logisticians, the training cadre, repair depots, food packaging factoriums for Nutri-bars and anything else he deemed necessary. It helped I also gave him the spare tesseract from the Omega Vault, to speed movement of material and troops without using time and fuel. Plus he was an extra defense insurance as Victor had moved to forge Retribution with the victorious Lancefire Blackstone Fortress. At Forge Retribution we had an entire university complex dedicated to rediscovering proper science from the first principles, now led by a Vulcan clone calling himself Aristotle. The same name as the teacher of Alexander the Great, so he should do great. It was all in the name. They already started photoelectric cells and uranium fission piles, so I had great hopes for that project. Even if they only produced regular atomic weapons one day, those were still very useful for ship combat via teleport or torpedo warheads. As I already received the Tau Horizon engine from Trizin, so it was only a matter of long days with the STC template to adapt the engine for various space-moving vehicles and torpedoes. We may not reach 90% of light speed like the Tau could do for their fragile warships, but even 40 or 50% would be a major advantage, as the Imperial Navy's plasma engines could only reach 25% of light speed in real space, while missiles and torpedoes were so slow one needed to be quite close to actually hit anything. Torpedoes' engines were actually the easiest to obtain, the converse of the Necron's Macarius Warplus engine, who worked better at larger sizes. The smaller the mass, the easier it was for a Horizon engine to accelerate it, as it was proper and scientific in my view. With the new Ares engines I installed on a few prototypes, the torpedoes could actually reach 70% light speed, bringing them close to actual hit ratios obtained with beam weapons. Plus, the speed itself converted mass to energy, such that solid iron warheads were just as effective as atomic ones, and certainly more safe to carry. I saved the finished engine on another data slate, and transferred over to fabricator Gemma quarters, eager to show her the good news. Lord Lancefire. This is not what you think, Gemma exclaimed in surprise, as I saw her drain a damaged servitor of life and electricity, leaving him quite dead. It is not a capital punishment for a failed servitor? I asked, a bit curious. Not really. Some of the imported tech priests have brought with them a new creed, the Brotherhood of Petrified Lightning. They wish to harness the animus of their foes and bind it to the Omnissiah, reclaiming the motive force. Gemma explained in an eager voice. What? Tell me more, I demanded with a wary voice. These Fulgurites believe only those found worthy in the eyes of the machine god should possess the divine grace of his galvanizing power. They would willingly render every civilization that did not praise the Omnissiah totally inert, plunging their civilizations of the unenlightened into eternal night. Imagine, it works. Enemies such as Necrons would find their devices inert, their Xenos robots falling to the ground without power. Gemma gushed and pointed at the dead servitor. It also drains life force, not just electricity? I asked, even more horrified. All energy is motive force, life force or holy electricity. Praise the Omniscience. She chanted in near-total religious ecstasy. Order your mind, Gemma. Who is the Omnissiah? I asked rhetorically. The god of all knowledge, the machine god, she declared with zeal. Is it though? I hummed to myself, and tapped the twin Aquila on my chest. Her bionic eyes froze on the Aquila as she slowly regained her senses. The Emperor is the Omnissiah. But, what does it have to do with the creed? She wondered, a bit more logical. There are many things wrong with it. I just had to hear it once, to realize the purpose of this creed is to target the Emperor himself. Do you even know what the petrified lightning means? I asked, a bit harshly. Only the advanced creed followers know, she murmured, a bit chastised. So I showed her. The Vulcan coffin appeared beside me, impaled with the same petrified lightning these Fulgurites worshipped. Omnissiah's holy son, killed by the Fulgurite. She realized in a mere second. That's how you keep producing gene seed for the new Primaris. I stored away the coffin, and pointed at her. The Avengers. Why did you think they were avenging? But, this would mean there's a giant conspiracy, right inside the machine cult. Aimed at the Emperor, perhaps? Trying to disentangle the worship of the Omnissiah from the Emperor, by killing his body. Gemma muttered as her logic processes went further. And they found the perfect test subject. Not only a Primarch, but one bestowed with infinite motive force. A perpetual, just like the Emperor himself, I continued with a sad voice, as more insights developed into my mind. Vulcan wasn't placed in the Omega Vault as a reward, but hidden away at the edge of the galaxy, far beyond the Astronomican's reach. And who would have the knowledge and power to construct a watch fortress then move it at Iriak? Who had access to the Noctis Labyrinth, to copy the data for the Catan weapon? Who made the Star Fort into an Ordo Xenos base, guarded by deadly Deathwatch and a machine spirit that might also be a minor AI? Who had knowledge of the Federation's Omega weapon, the nanite plague inside the vault? The reach of the Cabal was so long, it went before the Horus heresy. Plans withing plans. I'm already locking everything with anathema class overrides. Gemma muttered in a subdued voice. Just make a list with the known fulgurites. I'll have my people extract the information from their minds, I said in a tired voice, and placed the STC slate on her desk. Damn it all to hell. Not even my friendly Mechonicus allies were free of this cabal. Then again, Mars itself was split in two sides during the heresy. And with tech priests being functionally immortal as they replaced failing organs with bionics, there would be living remnants among the older tech priests. Another ship needed to go to Terra, and warn the Emperor of this conspiracy. The new Black Fulchions then, as they had the Safekan gene seed. Plus, I did have a whole lot of valuable STCs and Necron artifacts for the Emperor to use. My Uri's pattern void bike armed with the Nostari Vulcanite cannon will do great for his Custodes. As would the better Invictus warsuit. Make Archmago's cowl spit in his soup, hopefully. Some more natural blanks as well? And some young Rambo clones. At least 10,000 of them, armed with phase blades. I'm sure Sly Marbo will be impressed if his clones become blank Custodes. Not if, when. The Emperor wasn't stupid. Eventually the Crusade fleet was ready to go, although still only half of the mighty fleet that departed towards Stygius a decade ago. Half of the battleships and 200 cruisers were still under repair. Only 15 battleships and 300 cruisers, as well as 4 Astartes battle barges and a fleet carrier. Some other ships would also join in support, like 21 escort carriers and a machine forge Arc Mechonicus with 1 million servitor pilots on their drone fighters. However, I did send several Lancefire trade fleets of cargo and transport vessels escorted by our warp engine frigates and destroyers ahead to my chosen waypoints, mainly forge worlds like Graia and others on the way. I plan to skirt the south border of the Imperium and collect some of my successor chapters en route, while training the troops on easy orc worlds on the way. Sister Decima would be happy to be put to combat use, not just to warm my bed. Sister Stern was also eager to electrify more of humanity's enemies, as were her sisters of battle. The girls had received new equipment, including some nicer armed sentinels for the Blank Sisters, but also iron beamers for their vehicles and Volkite pistols for the infantry. The Silent Sisters had reached 1,000 silent Leviathans, now modified with actual sound absorbers from the Invicta warsuit, to be able to walk silently indeed. Inquisitor Valane had to join me for observation purposes, and to smooth the way should we encounter more reluctant Imperials. She had a close bodyguard of real Deathwatch Astartes including Brother Semnai, as well as the remaining 3,000 Black Shields converted from the captured Astral Claws as an experimental inquisitorial regiment. There was no point keeping the Astral Claws as backup, since I had many more blank Primaris Marines that did not need mind shackles to be loyal. Nighthouse Lancefire provided 1,000 night suits, upgraded by Speranza to our best tech available, and piloted by blank pilots of course. We had more knights, but those were fresh and not that experienced yet, plus I wanted a reserve force back home. It seemed Speranza had a soft spot for knights, seeing them worthy of his time and efforts. They also had a decent escort of blank sacristans in armed sentinels, mostly to keep infantry away. The Mechonicus Arc also carried a demi-legion of the Deus Ex Machina Titan Legion, if only 100 warlord units that received the latest upgrades including weave shields and Tiamat-class armor. We had to test the latest upgrades in combat, before knowing which things worked or not. Gemma had ordered 1 million Scutari to escort the Titans, along with a coterie of tech priests of all types. The auxiliar troops were equipped with newer Ragnarok armor and armed sentinels received from Forge Goth and Mazoa, although without phase blades. The Special Sentinels were instead bestowed upon the new Blank Division, along with falchion tanks, and will test the burst lances in war. Perhaps it was safer to give phase blades only to blanks. Speranza wasn't stupid. My Primaris Marines would test the new Invictus warsuits, as well as the Void bikes for aerial ground support, piloted by Tech Marines. Only one company would still have the Terminator plates, if needed to insert for boarding operations or other specialist role. From my own estimations, the warsuit would have an order of magnitude better firepower and defense than a Terminator, especially because of the Vulcanite disintegrator and the Tiamat hide armor. Somehow, my Terminators had become light-armored scouts for the rest of the chapter. The real Leviathan dreadnoughts had been relegated to their old purpose of interring wounded brothers in walking coffins, a sad but always present reminder that in 40k anyone could lose. The dreadnoughts also didn't count for the 1,000 limit of battle brothers in the Codex Astartes, so perhaps it would work well anyways. Chiron was very glad to return to active combat, after being replaced by Strategus at Alivar. Spartan was put in charge of the Auxilia, and many of his clone clade of soldier clone skeins were appointed officers or sergeants for the newer regiments. As the clones were bred exclusively for war, I had high hopes of doing great, especially as the blank officers in the Auxilia had been retasked with leading the Blank Division and its units. A similar role was given to the Admiral clone, who I called M for ease of my tongue. Greek names were hard. Why couldn't he pick a normal name like Nelson? Although ship captains always remained blanks, as well as most of the bridge officers, numerous crew roles were taken by his naval clade clones, who were modified to withstand prolonged ship travel far better than regular human and even voidsmen, mostly by dialing their warp presence to the minimum possible and still keep them alive. For now, lobotomized servitors were still the bulk of the lower deck crew, but M wanted to replace them with a new clade, far more resistant to radiation and other toxic byproducts. Speranza had opposed this clade for some reason though, so it was locked for now. As the Eternal Lament powered its engines and moved beside the Black Lament, the Crusade was ready to depart. Obviously, I called it the Halo Crusade, for no ulterior reason. First stop, a small orc domain located directly south of us. Speranza had indicated it as a good place to expand, and so we did. Plus it would mean collecting more life sacrifices for the chronophage swords, more Xeno Auxilia to blunt an enemy charge, maybe more ship hulls. And plenty of real practice for the troops. Nobody was actually surprised when our troops deployed in good order and massacred the orcs with little problem, not even the new Auxilia troops. Compared to mostly savage orcs deprived of their WOG field, even the regular Auxilia did great, each scoring at least 100 kills, while the snipers had broken all records with their bolt sniper rifles. There was even one guy with 2,100 kills. The test was mostly to calibrate weapons and give the officers more experience. But if I could loot millions of metal asteroids and dozens of ships, plus millions of orc weapons for free, surely it was the grace of the Emperor. A week later, we were replenishing at Forge World Metallica when an astropath call was received from the night world of Rakor 9, which was sworn to the Knights of House Raven. Something about a Nephilim king, not that astropath telegrams made much sense anyways. You had to guess at the meaning. M and Spartan cornered me in my room, where I was receiving the loving ministrations of my Inquisitor wife. You heard about the Tyrannid fleet, Lancefire. How's she still breathing like that? M asked with an awed glance at my little lance getting inhaled by a hungry Inquisitor. Practice makes perfect, M, you go on and organize the fleet, I'll be there as soon as I finish. I explained politely, while Brother Jotan simply rolled his eyes at me. Spartan simply smirked and gave me a thumbs up. His thumb was bigger than my lance. Little did they know, I was actually practicing my null powers, by drawing power from my psycho wife, slowly and pleasantly, of course. I did need to become a stronger pariah, and Valaine needed to train her mental resistance as well. I just found a clever way to train, that's all. You could even say I was calibrating my weapon. Soon after reaching the Rakor system, I found what that Nephilim king really was. Unlike the normal Tyrannid hordes, This hive used massive organisms that copied imperial knights, both in looks and tactics, forming feudal-like formations. And while the low-level support of Tyrannid Sacristan lookalike were easy to mow down by our combo Botanic_Bolt_Cannon and Iron Beamers on the Invictus warsuits, only the Vulcanite Disintegrators could harm the armored shells of their knight bioforms, and not that well either. Click, and the Primaris Marines returned to their repaired docks. This called for a deployment of my own house knights, and see how their new weapons fared against this strange strain of Tyrannids called the Court_of_the_Nephilim_King. Matching the Tyrannids in numbers and power, it now became a game of wits between my knights and the Synapse creatures. Their pyrovore bio-cannons shot blasts of burning bioplasma that splashed over our new weave shields, and what left over got through were ineffective against the Tiamat carapace bonded over the real adamantium underneath. Screech. A loud howl erupted from their monstrous king, causing the bioforms to regroup and retreat from their siege of House Raven, leaving dozens of wrecked Raven knights on the ground. Void bikes began to harass and hound isolated Nid knights, and several Auxilia Megatauros cars surrounded them, firing with Vulcan Mega Bolters at the weaker joints. Soon enough, the bulk of the Tyrannid court was corralled into a mountain valley, an easy prey for either an armored assault or our orbital support. The Nephilim King knew this as well, as he stepped in front and gestured with his whip swords, perhaps demanding an honorable death. But nope. Such an effective formation would be too useful to kill. They could fight for me instead. A new auxilia unit. Tyrannid Knights, I exclaimed happily on the bridge, watching my sons and daughters simply grin in response. And click. Joining my other special Tyrannid tyrants and what else in the Tesseract, I soon began to implant the Synapse units with my Necron mind shackles. An excellent loot for today. And a reminder that our enemies were also evolving and upgrading themselves. Knights. Soon enough they will deploy Titan legions. I'm not painting such a beast. I heard Captain Law mutter in a low voice. This boy. Always fun to tease. You will paint 2 of them instead. And Menelaus is excused, because he was a good boy. I ordered with a wink at my librarian son. Silly Law. Don't worry, I'll help too. These Xeno-Auxilia will be helpful one day. My wiser son spoke with a lamenting voice. From their hive ships, I only kept a spiky multi-clawed bioship that seemed to have been evolved for boarding purposes. The rest were either butchered by the fleet or sent to burn in the sun, a dangerous plan, Lord Lancefire. The Tyrannids will eventually adapt to whatever means you have to control them. My Inquisitor wife muttered in a soft voice. Such is war. Those who fail to adapt are bound to lose. But for now, I think I'm doing fine. I answered with a nod. Warning received. I was already busy repairing the system and providing it with metal asteroid for forts. It was still a losing game. Knight houses should not hide on remote medieval worlds, exposed to any strong invasion. They should base themselves on a forge world, and fight with the support of the Mechonicus. Just like I did. Want me to deal with the Raven Knights? Valaine asked, sounding curious. I checked my implant to see if there were any interesting persons still alive, and surely enough they had Baroness Vardas tending to her damaged knight suit. We'll both go. I do have a knight suit as well. When we appeared beside the medieval keep, I piloted my Lonely Reason Knight, and my metal palm held an Inquisitor and 2 Deathwatch bodyguards, mostly as a show of skill. Piloting a knight was quite easy for me now, almost like a second skin. Welcome to House Raven. Although you may understand we are much in disarray at the moment. Lady Vardas spoke from a tall tower. I simply moved my palm at the side of the tower to let the passengers debark, and then stored my suit and stepped beside them, back in my Terminator plate. Brother Ulrich managed to frown at me, even while wearing his armored helmet. Semnai simply shrugged, already used with my antics. Then again, the man had fought a great demon in the walk and even burned a demon world by himself. This is Inquisitor Romeus, and I am Pef Lancefire. I can provide assistance. I proposed with a mild voice, and with a trick of the tesseract gathered all the damaged knights into the keep's courtyard. You don't feel like a psyker, Lord Lancefire? The Baroness observed with keen eyes. Semnai actually snorted at that, before restraining himself. Right, I should bring Canis and Joeton. I was the only one here without a retinue. Click. My gifts are of an entire opposite spectrum, Lady Vardas. I am what they call a null or a blank. When I grow up, I'll be able to eat demons on toast bread. Or even without toast. I explained politely, then smiled as the brave nobles around the Baroness drew back a step. I just sighed and skipped forwards, hiding the Necron orb of eternity with my shadows. In a minute, the damaged knights began to restore themselves, limbs re-knitting, armor plates unbending, even fusion reactors fusing back together. In 30 minutes, the Raven Knights were now pristine, possibly even better than they ever were. A medieval world didn't have the technology to maintain knights to their best form, after all. Whoa. Canis asked as he smelled the brand new knights. Not like our reason, Canis. See, no weave shields, no iron cannons, not even burst lances? I argued with my wolf. They also didn't have a grav chute to allow a smooth landing, nor phased blades, not the blessed auto simulacra repair devices. With chainswords and autocannons, even heavy stubbers as they armament, the poor Raven house looked like peasants compared to my advanced knights. Woo. Wooer. Canis proposed with a wise voice. Upgrade them? Difficult and dangerous. Knight houses fell to chaos quite often, as I knew well. I burned plenty of fallen houses. Lady Vardas had descended from her tower while I was busy, and could only stare at the repaired walkers in awe. This debt, I will speak with our princeps on Colossi, surely we can repay this favor somehow, she murmured with a fervent voice. I think armed sentinels are more than enough to maintain a military presence here, my lady. I propose you depart this world and base your knights at a forge world like Metallica. They can also upgrade the suits with far better weapons. I spoke with a wry glance at the stone walls of the keep. They even had barefoot peasants here, and reptile work animals instead of tractors. Even sentinels were overkill to maintain peace. An auxiliar sentinel appeared beside me, looking much like a smaller version of a knight, if far less expensive. Maybe 1,000 sentinels would reach the value of a single knight suit. The Baroness examined the unknown sentinel model with keen eyes, walking around it and even climbing into the cockpit for a spin. The smaller chainsword roared in the air with a loud engine growl. After she jumped out, she nodded cautiously. Far easier to pilot as well. Instead of 30 knights we could hold this world with 300 armed sentinels. Train the pilots as well. I grinned at her. My crusade fleet has 1 million sentinels in storage. Let's visit Colossi and see if your princeps is interested in joining. On the way to the nearby system, I got to know the Baroness much better, and gifted her a blank child as a reward.